So the data that we use in our operations, whether the data that we use in our business, whether it is our healthcare clinic or nutrition clinic or in our reproductive health center, where does that data come from? Okay, we want to see where data comes from, and can we always trust this data? What are the limitations of using this data? Whether we are the ones who have collected it or it is other people who have collected this data. So we have primarily two ways of getting data. We have primary sources and secondary sources of data. We can say we have primary data or secondary data. Okay, so these ones can be used interchangeably again. So primary data, when we are the ones who collect this data for a particular reason. So we want to find out how many people do come for family planning services. And then we start recording this data for 1 month. When we get this data, it is our own data, and we designed the tool, we collected the data ourselves. That is primary data. And then, of course, it has benefits because you're not making conclusion based on something that was collected from somewhere else. So this data, you will determine which tool to use, what questions to ask, how long you're going to collect this data, you're going to collect it among how many. Every question that you have in mind is answered because you are the one who actually collects this data. And that makes it very, very useful. So that means that there is great accuracy, reliability. You're collecting for a particular purpose. That means that you're aligning everything according to that purpose. So it addresses specific research issues. You have control on everything, okay, because you're the one who collects this data. And that means that you only collect information that is relevant to what you actually want to understand. The challenges is that it is time consuming. You need resources. You need to have the skills to do everything because you're the one doing it. Or if you can't, you can actually get someone to help you with the data collection process and do everything up to analysis and report writing. So the challenge is you need the resources. That is the main thing. But of course, if you don't have the skills to handle data, it's also another issue. Okay, but sometimes you can't always do it because you don't have the time or because it is difficult, or so however much it is good, sometimes you can't be able to do it on your own. Okay, and sometimes when you want to collect the data and then you send out questionnaires, people are not able to respond to your questionnaires. That is an issue of non-response bias, and then the conclusions that you make will actually be not be the right conclusions. Okay, but of course, if you have a study that you want to collect data that requires you to collect your own data, there are two things that you always have to ask yourself. One is whether the way you're collecting that data is that at the end of the day you get reliable data. What we mean by reliable data is that if a person A went and collected the data and then another person B went and collected that data, that they come up with similar data, that is reliable data. So when two individuals go and try to collect data on the same characteristics that you wanted to, or that you collected on, they should get similar or consistent findings. And then validity, that the tool that you're using to measure should actually be the right tool. Don't use a tool that is not supposed to be used to measure what you want to measure. So that is an issue of validity. Okay, so the tool should be measuring what it is intended to measure. So because we said primary data is not always feasible, you can rely on data that has been collected by another researcher for another purpose. But still, this data can actually meet the objectives of your study. So that is what we term as secondary study. So usually this data is either electronic or in files, and you have to go and reanalyze this data again. So this data can be internal data, that is let us say, for example, the financial department of a business or a company. They have been collecting this data. They have been, you have financial records. So that means that the data that was collected was for financial purposes. But this data can give you insights on the behaviors of, let us say, on financial behaviors of the clients of that institution. There's something that you can pick that. You can know when people deposit, when do they withdraw, and things like that. So you can get the patterns from there. So it is data within the organization that is collected for a particular activity or section or department, but you can use it. Or it is data that is collected outside the company, but you can still use it if you get the appropriate authorization to use it. So what are the advantages? Of course, the data is already collected. You just go, have access to this data, analyze, come up with your conclusion. That means you don't need a lot of resources. You don't have the time to lose, because this data is already collected. You can find out some things that were hidden, some trends that were hidden in this data. So you can have a lot of discoveries that you can actually make. You don't need to develop a new data collection tool, because already this data is actually there. You can always find it in the archives, and you can use it to compare with even primary data. So it offers an alternative for when you don't have primary data. The challenge is that someone was collecting this data without your purpose in mind. They didn't know that at one point you'll come and use this data for this purpose. So that means that for them, they just collected what they needed. And then for you, you come and look at this data. Most likely, there are certain things that are going to be missing in this data. And that usually means that this data may not fit what you are looking for. Okay, and the level of accuracy may not be the level that you want. Sometimes you can't get all these files, so accessibility becomes very important. Some of the information becomes useless. It might have quality information that is now useless, and it is in bulky because it is a lot of files that you have to check and things like that. So you get a lot of problems, challenges handling this data, but also errors that you can no longer be able to correct. But still, you can use it. But for you to use it, you need to check if indeed this is something that you can rely on. How was the data collected? How was it manipulated? Was it actually manipulated? What was the degree of accuracy? What data collection tool do they use? The nature of questions that they used to ask, and a lot of questions. So you need to answer these questions, and if these questions are answered to a good extent and you're satisfied, you can continue and use this secondary data. So that marks the end for now. Thank you.